and welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know, a podcast about philosophy, ancient literature, and whatever we've been reading recently. My name is Thomas Magby. I'm joined, as always, by Mr. AJ Hannenberg.
That's me.
And Mr. Graham Donaldson.
Hi.
And today I have no witty retort because I'm doing the intro. So, AJ, you are leading our discussion today. What do you got for us? We
are doing the last part of Rousseau's The Social Contract. And then we'll be done, and we'll do something else.
And you feel great about that?
I am glad to have read it.
I
was not glad while reading it.
Okay. What about it?
It's not one of those ones that brings me a profusion of joy as I read.
You seem to enjoy the ideas in it. Is it just a slog? The language a slog? What do you not like about it?
I feel like, can we do that
Sure.
after?
Great.
At the end? Because then we can evaluate whether or not you as an audience should go read it.
Okay. I feel like you've given us the answer.
The answer is maybe.
Okay, great. Let's go for it.
So today I was reading the final part, and I think maybe last episode I said we'd get back to what the best kind of government was.
Uh-huh.
Forget all that.
Okay.
We're not doing that today. What we are doing is talking about what kind of came as a surprise at the end of this book, which I was kind of expecting he would give really concrete, this is how you should put together a society. And there's some of that. He talks about what a dictator should look like, and that's when things are so bad that the government at large does not have time to make a decent decision. We can't vote, we can't get together, and that's when you need a dictator, and his job is to make decisions quickly and do whatever he has to do really fast. And then as soon as that danger is over, one of two things is going to happen. Either he'll give his power back up or he'll become a tyrant. One of the two. And usually they give it up.
That's how it was in Rome. Like, you were a dictator for a set length of time, and then you had to give that power back.
And he said that was great. It works in times of emergency. He also said the more serious the thing you're voting on, the more of a majority it needs. So if it's not a big deal, then a simple majority is fine. But if it's a big matter to the state, then you should have near unanimity. And so he gives a few of these things, and then he goes on a huge, long diatribe about what ancient Rome looked like, and I don't feel that you as an audience would necessarily find that interesting. What I did find interesting was his thoughts on religion.
Okay.
So we have talked in the past, and if you're new to us, I'm sorry, we've talked in the past how we're not a Christian podcast, but we are Christians that make a podcast, right?
Okay.
Would you agree with that?
Sure.
We talk about the ancient world. Sometimes our subjects are not overtly Christian.
Difference?
We don't talk about strictly and always only Christian things, right? Would you agree?
Yes, like by definition.
Everything's Christian things.
I know, and that's the thing, is that because we are Christians, that sort of leaks into all of our discussions, right?
Gotcha.
We always sort of bring that up at some point, and we don't, we make no bids at partiality, really, I guess. Even if you are saying that I'm presenting this impartially, you are taking some sort of philosophical stance, right? That it should be given impartially. So we try not to shy away from that. And so this is going to be an interesting podcast for our Christian listeners, and I'm hoping also for our non-Christian listeners, because it's about why Christianity sucks in the state, why it's as bad for the country.
Specifically when church and state are together, is that what he's getting at? Or just the church in general?
You'll find out.
Okay.
So I'm going to go through it. We'll talk about sort of the history of religions and the state, and then the different kinds of religions in the state, and then what it would look like to have a Christian-only state, like a perfect Christian state, and how that would go. And should your citizens be religious? So those are sort of the different headings we're going to go under. So the history of religion in the state, and then different kinds of religions in the state, what the perfect Christian state would look like, and should your citizens be religious?
Okay.
That's kind of a preview of our episode today. So he says, in the old days, boys, early days of states, there was, God was the king. That's how it worked. Your God was in charge. The things that you did for your religion, it was the same as doing things for the state, right? There was no real difference. If I did something for the state, I was serving my God. If I did something for my God, I was often serving the state. There were no such things as religious wars, because every war was religious, right? There was no differentiation between a political war and a religious war. They were always mixed, and it was always the same.
Wait, starting when?
I think he's talking BC, way, way, way old days.
Does he have
so
examples?
The time of walls for countries, and I'm expecting you guys to get fully cranky about most of this.
Already
and
cranky.
I'm into it.
No.
So if you want to get cranky,
That was quick.
open those floodgates and crank it up.
Great. Okay.
But I'm just trying to get my bearings. So, is he talking about Ancient Mesopotamia.
Yeah, we're talking like ancient Mesopotamia and
All societies
Jewish
have
peoples and-
some form of religion, and that religion's been tied to the state. Therefore, all state action of war is religious.
yes,
Yeah.
that's kind of what he says. And there's no way, like the conquered were forced to adopt the gods of their conquerors, and it was necessary to conquer to get that to happen,
Sure.
right? So there's no way of converting a people except by enslaving it, and there's no missionaries except for conquerors, right? If you want someone to convert to your religion, you beat them at war, and then they are like, okay, your gods are better, we'll switch to your gods. Awesome.
But even in the Bible, you've got conversion from Judaism to like adopting Asherah poles and being like, yeah, we kind of like these Canaanite gods, and slowly absorbing it into their culture.
I didn't say he supported it well, Graham.
Oh, okay,
I just said this is what
This
he
is his
said.
argument.
Oh,
Please let him make his blind assertions on his own. Yes.
He does say that, he does mention that the Jewish people kind of refuse to capitulate. They refuse to take on the gods of their captors. And so that's why they are persecuted, is because they won't accept the gods of the people that have taken over their country, right? So they have to be enslaved and they have to be punished, and that's the problem. Okay, and then come the Romans, who leave the gods rather than obliterating them, right? So they would come to a country, they would say, hey, gods of this country, please leave your peoples so we can conquer them. Then they would conquer them and be like, look, you guys want to still worship your gods? Fine, rock and roll. We'll leave a wreath to Jupiter here,
Right.
and you guys can chill out, but that's fine. Worship your gods, we'll worship ours, and then there's, no biggie. And that
Pay your
kind of-
taxes.
Yeah, pay,
Right.
pay your taxes and don't ever rebel, and that's
Right.
and everyone's happy. And then the Romans also sort of ended up adopting these gods, which meant a multitude of gods, right? And so in this climate is where Jesus came. Okay, I'm going to read some quotes because he gets fiery in these sections. So I'm going to read some quotes. Don't worry, they're pretty fun, and none of them are too long, but I will read them. So this is the stuff about Jesus. What the pagans had feared took place. Then everything changed its aspect. The humble Christians changed their language, and soon this so-called kingdom from another world turned, under a visible leader, into the most violent of earthly despotisms. However, as there have always been a prince and civil laws, this double power and conflict of jurisdiction have made all good polity impossible in Christian states, and men have never succeeded in finding out whether they were bound to obey the master or the priest. So he says that's bad, right? So Christianity came to power, and because of that,
two-sword doctrine.
What, the
like
what?
the sword of the state and the sword of heaven, like the two.
exactly, then every citizen doesn't know which he's supposed to obey, right? Which is different than having my king and my God be essentially the same thing. And if I'm obeying my God, I'm obeying my king, and
Or
vice
having
versa.
ancient Rome, where it's like the choose your fighter on the Smash Bros. Screen. There's like 1,000 of them. You don't know who to pick.
Yeah,
It kinda doesn't
and then
matter.
it really doesn't matter
And
which.
it really
you pick.
doesn't matter which you pick, because all you do is spam that down B.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
down B is that's the ticket. And so he says this kind of happens everywhere. Wherever the clergy is corporate body, it is master and legislator in its own country. There are thus two powers, two sovereigns in England and in Russia, as well as elsewhere. And a great quote: the law of Christianity at bottom does more harm by weakening than good by strengthening the constitution of the state. Okay. How you guys feeling so far?
So he sees Christianity in a state as kind of like a subversive force, a force that weakens the social ties, a force that weakens the sort of social fabric.
Yeah, because I always have a choice
Yeah.
whether to follow what the king is saying, the sovereign,
Yeah.
the prince, or to follow my own internal conscience and the dictates of the state. I think in this case he's thinking of organized religion.
Now, this is Gibbon's argument in Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, or whatever it's called, right?
Is it so?
Because he says that like part of the downfall of Rome was this introduction of Christianity that kind of split the vitality of the Roman people. Is that you've introduced this thing that people get all geeked up about, and instead of shoring up the Roman Imperium, they're like, we're going to go do a monastery. And then all those like able-bodied, really, maybe capable citizens are spending all of their time and light doing this Christian stuff when they could have been helping out Rome. And so Rome falls apart due to lack of
Conviction.
of conviction and lack of like doers, people who have like this chutzpah to go and do stuff.
So do you agree with him so far?
I mean-
you think Christianity is bad for the state?
No, I mean,
in the sense that it weakens
For
the
state qua state, maybe.
Exactly. That it
What do you
will
mean state qua state?
split the loyalty of the people between the state and the religion. That's the example you're giving. That
Yeah.
you one person only has so much energy. Do you devote 100% to the state, or do you split that with religion? And that undermines the state by definition.
Yeah, I guess the argument is like, yeah, I think even Augustine agrees with him that like
There are two.
that there are two cities, the city of God and the city of man, and the righteous, belong to the city of God, even though you're living in the city of man. And so, I don't think he's wrong, but then the question is, can there be a marriage of Christianity and statehood, which will be an interesting thing.
Statity.
I think I can already see where he's going. He's going to say no. Well, maybe he's going to say yes. I don't know. That's interesting.
Okay, so far I'm surprised you guys are on board so far.
Why? That doesn't. Just the way you've set it up, it seems that he must be right. That you split your loyalty if you have two things to be loyal to.
I guess my thought would be that it's short-sighted, right? He is not talking about the justice of the state. He's not talking about the moral fabric of the state. He's not talking about what keeps a community together. He's not talking about, there were things that Christians did in Rome that nobody else was doing, like taking care of abandoned children and taking care of women. And
all great, but I don't know if he'll get there, but don't you think that like the truly authentic Christian state would immediately be captured by a foreign invading army because they're probably all pacifists?
oh man, you're jumping ahead.
I know, but that's what. That doesn't bother me if that's the conclusion. Anyway, I'll be curious how he gets there, but that wouldn't bother me if that were his conclusion.
Okay. Man, this is going differently than I thought.
Sorry.
If you guys just agree the whole time, this is not going to go as I
How can
planned.
it be otherwise, AJ?
AJ, your thoughts are dumb.
Okay. Oh, Graham, you're just showing up for me today. Thank you so much.
Is that helpful?
Have my back. I love it. Although I'm presenting his thoughts,
Oh,
so that
sorry,
stings a little bit.
Thank you.
But
Yes.
okay, so the three types of religion. So that was heading one, kind of the history, how we got here, right? So state and God are one, and then we have Rome, where everything kind of goes haywire, and then Jesus shows up and splits the state, and that's a bummer. So three types of religion, he says. Well, he actually says there are two types, and then later he adds a third. So I'm just going to say there are three types now instead of pulling that bait and switch on you. So three types of religion. He says, there's that of a man, and I will quote his description. The first, which has neither temples, nor altars, nor rites, and is confined to the purely internal cult of the supreme God and the eternal obligations of morality, is the religion of the gospel, pure and simple, the true theism, which may be called natural divine right or law. Okay?
Okay.
So that's the one kind. Why furrowed brows?
I just don't understand it.
Yeah, I'm not
Same.
quite sure I do either.
Okay.
Okay, that of a citizen. So codified in a single country, gives it its gods, its own tutelary patrons, it has its dogmas, its rites, and its external cult prescribed by law. Outside the single nation that follows it, all the world is in its sight infidel, foreign and barbarous. The duties and rights of a man extend for it only as far as its own altars. So all early people were this way, right? So you have like a state religion that is codified in that one country, right? And you've got state-sanctioned rituals, you've got state-sanctioned altars and temples, and it's all sort of under the state, and that's like part of that nation, and that's it. As opposed to that of the internal man. So there's the citizen religion and that of man. Guys with me so far? Mm-hmm. Can you think of any examples of like a state religion that's that way now?
I mean, you probably have some kind of mixing of like the Ayatollahs in Iran, where you have the mixing of like Islam and the running of the country.
Yeah,
Would probably be the one that I could think of.
that's kind of what I was thinking of.
It does have to be explicitly religious, so something like patriotism or nationalism doesn't fall under this. Okay, that's a separate thing.
Yeah, this is strictly religious.
Okay.
Okay, and then the third sword, which gives men two codes of legislation, two rulers, and two countries, renders them subject to contradictory duties, and makes it impossible for them to be faithful both to religion and citizenship. Such are the religions of the Lamas and of the Japanese, and such is Roman Christianity, which may be called the religion of the priest. It leads to a sort of fixed and antisocial code, which has no name.
Interesting. So the obligations of the state are in conflict with the religious obligations.
Yeah.
Again, this would be the soldier who is pacifist for religious reasons.
Yes.
Right?
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Sure.
Yep.
Standing up to Nebuchadnezzar or whoever it was.
Or, I mean, even if we're talking U.S., people who stood against Roe v. Wade, right? And did it for religious reasons.
So a conviction
Sure,
that's
yeah.
in contradiction
Right?
to
Into
any
The
some laws.
state had said one thing,
Yep.
and the religion said a different thing, right?
What would Rousseau think about our freedom of religion in the state? I guess you're going to get to
Well,
that.
we're going to get there. That's kind of near the end.
But yeah, so that he says that there's sort of these two streams running through a citizen. You've got these sort of two loyalties, two convictions, and who's going to win when they come into conflict.
Right.
Yeah.
And he says the religious one, presumably.
Okay.
I don't know,
he's
there's tons of apostates out there.
he's going to highlight the problems with each of these three.
Okay.
Okay.
So all three have their defects, but the third is so clearly bad that it is a waste of time to stop to prove it such. All that destroys social unity is worthless. So
Okay.
that
Dang.
third one we're not even going to waste time on. You got split unity, and that sucks, and it's bad. It's no good.
Okay.
The second is good in that it unites the divine cult with love of the laws, and making country the object of the citizens' adoration, teaches them that service done to the state is service done to its tutelary God. There can be no pontiff, save the prince, and no priests, save the magistrates. To die for one's country then becomes martyrdom, violation of its laws, impiety, and to subject one who is guilty to public execration is to condemn him to the anger of the gods.
So he's super cool with like the mixing of fascism and cults into a state.
Yes, he does have a negative though. So he says,
okay.
Well then,
it is bad in that being founded on lies and error,
okay.
it deceives men, making them credulous and superstitious, and drowns the true cult of the divinity in empty ceremonial.
Great.
It is bad again when it becomes tyrannous and exclusive, and makes a people bloodthirsty and intolerant, so that it breathes fire and slaughter and regards as a sacred act the killing of everyone who does not believe in its gods. The result is to place such a people in a natural state of war with all others, so that its security is deeply endangered.
it's like the pharaohs of Egypt.
Yeah, you are so on fire for your religion, and since you see everyone else as infidel, you must be at war with them always, and so you are always at risk.
Okay.
Right? Which kind of makes sense. I mean, if we're talking some of the folks in the Middle East that have religion and state kind of mixed,
Or
if
the
they-
pharaohs of Egypt. Right?
or the pharaohs of
Right.
Egypt, right? So there are examples of this all throughout history of a country that says my religion is the right one, everyone else is wrong, and then wages war on other countries to their detriment.
And this is different from what you were talking about before of Rousseau's view of like a prehistory of the union of church and state, or is this basically the same
It
thing?
seems like the same thing. Yeah,
Okay.
I think this is just a further description of why that's good and bad.
Got it.
Okay. And then, so we've talked about the third one, which is the split. We've talked about the second one, which is God and stick together. And so now we have to talk about the true Christianity, as he calls it. There remains, therefore, the religion of man, or Christianity. Not the Christianity of today, but that of the gospel, which is entirely different. By means of this...
I hate so much that, when is he writing?
let me see.
That sentence could come straight out of anything from today. That's
1680 or
That's so good. Sorry,
when's
that's so
he
good.
written?
You don't have to
Let's
look it up.
find out.
It's
I'll
600
find
years old, and like we still talk about these things the same way. I hate reading old books.
Let's see. Published in 1762.
It's the
Never
worst.
mind. Off 100 years.
Wait, so you don't like this?
It's just funny that whatever we like this thing 400 years ago is still saying no, not this modern day Christianity when it was good back then, like the same way that we do now. Yeah, just anyway, it's just very funny when you read someone hundreds of years ago say something that is still true today, though we act like it's a new idea to have now of no, our Christianity is bad, the old one was good. It's just funny.
Yeah. Still doing sort of the same thing.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not done. This
I
quote
know.
goes on.
Yeah.
But that of the gospel, which is entirely different. By means of this holy, sublime, and real religion, all men, being children of one God, recognize one another as brothers. And then the society that uniteth them is not dissolved even at death. But this religion, having no particular relation to the body politic, leaves the laws in possession of the force they have in themselves without making any addition to it. And thus, one of the great bonds that unite society, considered inseverably, fails to operate. Nay, more. So far from binding the hearts of the citizens to the state, it has the effect of taking them away from all earthly things, I know of nothing more contrary to the social spirit. So I'm getting real mixed signals from this guy. Like he seems to think that
Some of it's good.
He seems to be saying that this is the real thing, right? And it doesn't
belief in the brotherhood of man. He's like, but screw that. That ruins states.
And that's the thing. Like I can't nail down if he is actually,
Is he being
as I would call it, a Christian. Like it seems like he is believing in like an ethereal divinity of nature.
Sure.
Like a nature cult, but I can't really nail it down.
Oh, he's definitely believing in like. He probably I think he's definitely thinking that there is a pre-Christian religious thing that is true, but all the people who've like codified it into things are wrong.
And like all these rituals are bogus.
It really is. All these rituals are bogus, but it's like this. It's at its core. It is this, the brotherhood of humanity. If we can only get to that, then, well, I would assume he said then things would be right. But he says, and if we did that, well, then people wouldn't care about their states. And
so,
but that's why he's ambivalent of both. He thinks it's true that there is this brotherhood of man, but also you're not going to grow your kingdom if that's your view toward your neighboring countries, right?
You've ever seen that Simpsons episode where the lawyer's like, can you imagine a world without lawyers? And then he sees in his mind like all of humanity joining hands in a circle, and he's like, oh.
That's good.
Yeah. So I can't quite nail down what he actually believes, but
could there be any sarcasm? Could there be any
playful tongue-in-cheek?
Yeah, anything like that, do you think?
In this case, I don't think so. It seems like he's saying that it's good, but I think he believes that is the right religion, but that it's actually bad for the state. So I don't know what
I see what you're saying.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I don't know what his prescription is going to be. So, all right, part 3. Would the society of true and only Christians be the most perfect society imaginable? Where do you guys land on this?
What does perfect mean? Thomas Merton has this great section in The Seven-Story Mountain where he talks about how some people in monasteries are just crabby and that they're still crabby after 30 years in a monastery. And those are like those are probably pretty holy people in there. So Rousseau has to say no to this, right? If he's just set up this kind of ambivalence, he must not want the whatever pure Christian society is. And again, I think it's because it would undermine whatever collective state they've all gathered into.
Yeah. Yes, sort of. So he starts off by saying, first of all, if it's everybody perfect, it wouldn't be a society of men. And its perfection would be the thing that robs it of its bond of union, and the flaw that would destroy it is actually its perfection itself.
Sure.
So he goes on to say, Christianity as a religion is so entirely spiritual, occupied solely with heavenly things. The country of the Christian is not of this world. He does his duty indeed, but does it with profound indifference to the good or ill success of his cares. Provided he has nothing to reproach himself with, it matters little to him whether things go well or ill here on earth. If the state is prosperous, he hardly dares to share in the public happiness, for fear he may grow proud of his country's glory. If the state is languishing, he blesses the hand of God that is hard upon his people. So because we're looking so much to the next world, we don't give really two rips about what's happening here. If I'm suffering, well, I've been called to endure suffering. If I'm in prosperity, well, I've been charged with giving away to charity. So I am not really connected with the welfare of my state in so much as it doesn't affect my worship.
Obviously, I disagree with this. I think, I would rather hear his argument before pushing back on anything. I think that he is pulling on a strand of Christianity that would probably lead toward the monastic order of things, but think also that there are Christian statesmen as well who would want to see the state oriented toward good and to do good for those around them. So he might be describing a Christian position, but it's not like there's only one position of how Christians should interact with the state. Is that a fine? I'll just leave that there and we can come back to it later. Yeah. But I just don't think he's describing the one true view of how Christians would act in the state.
Yeah. All right, well, he's got more to say. He said if there was one guy in there that wasn't perfectly Christian, he would almost instantly get the better of all his brothers, right? Because he was willing to do the stuff that they're not. And he would get power and get power quick. And as soon as the power is there, well, God has told us to obey the power, right? And if it's abused, well, it is the scourge by which God punishes his children. And he is teaching us long-suffering, and he's causing us to suffer for the good of our own souls.
So this is sarcasm. Or he's
Oh yeah,
Tongue-in-cheek.
yeah. He's tongue in cheek here for sure. He's saying like, there's no way that Christians would rise up against this one evil guy in a perfectly Christian society because he would easily get the better of them, and then they would just stay under his thumb. What about battle?
They wouldn't do it.
The citizens march readily out to battle. None of them thinks of flight. They do their duty. But they have no passion for victory. They know better how to die than how to conquer. What does it matter whether they win or lose? Does not Providence know better than they what is good for them? So they go out, but they're just like, yeah, I guess I'll fight.
I guess I'll fight because I have to, but...
There's even a section where he says, can you imagine an entire army of Christians set up against somebody like the Romans
Right.
or the Gauls or someone that had a real passion for victory?
Right.
They just get stomped, right?
The outcome's already been determined, that there's nothing they can do to change that. Sure.
Yeah. Okay, and these next few quotes I really love, and then we can kind of talk about it. But I am mistaken in speaking of a Christian republic. The terms are mutually exclusive. Christianity preaches only servitude and dependence. Its spirit is so favorable to tyranny that it always profits by such a regime. True Christians, and this is your quotable, true Christians are made to be slaves, and they know it and do not much mind. This short life counts for too little in their eyes. And then he goes on. I shall be told Christian troops are excellent. I deny it. Show me an instance. For my part, I know of no Christian troops. I shall be told of the Crusades. Without disputing the valor of the Crusaders, I answer that so far from being Christians, they were the priests' soldiery, citizens of the church. They fought for the spiritual country which the church had somehow or other made temporal. Under pagan emperors, the Christian soldiers were brave. As soon as the emperors were Christian, they're not brave anymore.
Is that... I don't know if that's true, but does he give example or... That's,
No, he just says it, sort of. Okay, so that's... yeah, it's just
Blind
just
assertion.
sort of a blind assertion. All right, so what do you think about all that?
I mean, so it's playful, it's mean-spirited, but he's harping on a point, which is almost like the sort of continuing the Machiavelli notion of the body politic, which is there you need to have a bit of ruthlessness when you're going to have competing powers in the world in order to carve out a place for your people, for your state. And true Christianity is not a place of ruthlessness. And they're going to be a bunch of pushovers. And you don't want those guys running things. Is that...
Yeah, I think Machiavelli would agree with a lot of what he says.
Mm-hmm. And so... and insofar as you have a contingent of true believers in your state, they are going to either be a drain or they are going to like opt out and go like Benedict option in the mountains or whatever.
Yeah. Go to live in Pennsylvania.
Or they're going to eventually get watered down by some kind of God and country, what he calls like the church state.
that second category.
The second category,
It's going to morph,
which is-
it's going to morph
yeah.
into some sort of second
Where
category.
I believe in America because America is
God's
God.
country.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then and he rightly points out that is a route towards like eternal war and ruthlessness.
Are you on board with this argument?
No, I mean there's got to be. I mean, can you have a state where you have, well, it's sort of that American question, a state where you have a freedom of conscience and freedom of religion, the things that bind you together, can exist with sort of those competing notions, and I feel like, why not? I mean, America's existed for, hundreds of years, 200 what's the anniversary? 270?
1776.
Yeah.
So
250. So at least there's we have this running long case study. What do you think Rousseau would think about the Constitution? I mean, it's getting when was this book written? 17.
Can you just look it up? Early 1700s.
Yeah,
Early
it's fine.
1700s. So we're
Mid
80 years away for the Constitution or whatever. So like, and a lot of it was inspired by Rousseau's some of his writings. So it's just like, what do you think he would think of the attempt of saying that we're going to have a state that has this freedom of religion,
It seems like maybe
the rights of man?
what they have done is sort of take Rousseau's categories and create a fourth spot, because it's not a full state religion. It's not just I guess maybe it's just the religion of internal man, right? Maybe that's the risk they're taking, is that they've sort of pulled out the fangs by saying there's not one central church that also gets a spot here, right? It's not like we have the American government and then the Catholic Church. Like a lot of places have just sort of, they have the church and they have the state,
They have
and there's
whatever religion is,
but it's one church, right? And so it has almost as much power. And here, that's not as true anymore. Like, it's just not. And so they've sort of pulled out the teeth of that particular problem, where there isn't two full categories that every citizen has to obey. But you still have the problem of...
well, then it's back. We're almost like we're Rome again. You
Yes,
got the
you have
state,
so
and
many
then you've got
options.
all these different gods.
Exactly. And,
to speak.
But I still do have that sort of split loyalty. What does he say about it?
But you'll always have a split of loyalty if there is any kind of religion.
Yeah, so it's so far from binding the hearts of the citizens to the state, it has the effect of taking them away from all earthly things. I know of nothing more contrary to the social spirit. So that's probably, I mean, it seems like we're having to choose, and this is the least of all evils,
But
right?
shoot, you're going to have split loyalties, and you can even take religion out of it, like family loyalties
Right.
over the state, regional loyalties over bigger district loyalties. There's always going to be circles of life that are in conflict, or what he would say are in conflict with one another. He wants to be like a state maximalist, which is the only way that this thing runs is that everybody is under,
One state.
is under the one state and is completely subservient to the state. That's the only way that this thing is going to run the most efficient, and that is freaky.
But he doesn't even say that that's the good one, because then you have consistent war and like danger from the outside. And he said it's an error, like it's not a good religion.
Which of these three did he say was good? Or
What one does he like?
They all have positives and negatives,
Okay.
is what he said. It seemed like he wasn't giving a prescription for one over the others. And that's why it feels like what the Constitution of America has chosen is sort of well, let's sort of defang the religion so we don't have completely split loyalties, but it's better than always being at war and having having to give up our power to a deity. So, and what the Constitution came by, a lot of folks who were deists, right? Or
Sure.
people who didn't necessarily believe in the hand of God in the world. And so having that kind of out of the mix is a good thing.
Or thought that we were trucking towards his first option, which is a primitive religion that is the unity of all mankind.
Yeah.
So then oftentimes the deist position is like, okay, these guys, you're Jews over here, and you're Christians over here, and you're other religions over here, but really behind everything, we're all in the
There's
same
one
boat.
religion.
We're all worshiping the one thing. It's different roads to the top of the mountain. So maybe there's also that in the idea of, and that's what. So that first category. So I'm just wondering, maybe a deist reads Rousseau and was like, oh, this is the way to do it. Is we can believe in this sort of like brotherhood of man and the freedom of religion.
But that's the one he says was antisocial. Like it erodes the fabric of society.
Yeah, but on the other side, that's Rousseau's conclusion. But I think someone else could conclude, if you let the freedom of religion exist, eventually we'll all figure out that we're all just doing the same thing anyway. Like there's a positive belief that this is going to sort of work itself out into one Unitarians, right?
I also think any astute reader is going to recognize that Rousseau is moving the goalposts.
Yes, he is moving.
He says there are no Christian troops, and people go the Crusades, and he's like, those aren't real Christians. Oh, it's called
No True
No True
Scotsman.
Scotsman, right? He's pulling that in spades. We last episode talked about Joan of Arc. What else would you call
She
her?
wasn't a real Christian.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like I
a
would
witch.
argue that many of the people who fought in most of the wars in England during that period were Christians.
Sure.
Right? What else could you call them?
They weren't real Christians, AJ.
And that's the thing, is it seems like a no true Scotsman argument. And so anyone that's putting together a constitution and here's this nonsense about like Christians not being good warriors would just be like, that's hogwash. And I'm willing to bet that a good chunk of our current military is Christian. I've known a lot of Christians who are in the military or post-military or wanting to go into the military, and they're great warriors as far as I've known.
Not real Christians.
Oh, they're not. Oh, see,
Okay.
I hadn't considered that. Thanks.
Rousseau says it.
So yeah, that's sort of my position. Is that one feels like a no true Scotsman, and
Again, this comes down to like with Rousseau, I can never tell when he's being playful,
Right.
when he's being tongue in cheek, and when he's like actually being descriptive of what he thinks.
And when has there been a state when every citizen has only one loyalty and follows only that one loyalty? To your point a little bit earlier, right? Like
You got families.
People say, yeah.
even within those states where the god was the king, that it was like a god king. How often were there rebellions, and how often were there people who didn't like the laws or didn't like their king or decided to move away
Yeah.
or pulled something on the king or
That
wanted
tension-
to assassinate him and get somebody else set up? Like, it's
That-
not like everyone was just fully on board, 100%. Social ties are great.
That tension is in all the like old Greek tragedies, like with Oedipus, right? Like his family and his state in Thebes, and you always, or the
Antigone's the big
Antigone,
one.
the one
Yeah.
where she's like wants to go bury her brother.
That conflict
and
between family
conflict
and
between
state.
family and state. Like
Sure.
that's as old as story. So
Yeah.
And even related to our Nietzsche episode 2 episodes ago, he's putting forth a problem saying, well, Christians can't serve in combat, ignoring 1,700 years of Christians serving in combat and probably having some way of defending or justifying that. So he's also kind of slipping in, he's sidestepping the entire debate by saying, no, I'm presenting the one true option without really backing up that one true option.
Yeah.
what a rascal.
He is a rascal indeed.
Yeah. It seems like he makes a lot of claims and doesn't spend enough time with them to actually flesh them out enough. Like this whole argument takes the space of, on my Kindle, like 10 or 15 pages, right?
That sounds like a lot. You think that's not enough?
That's like maybe 5 or 6 normal pages.
Okay.
Right? It's just not a long time to make the claim that that religion is bad for the state, which actually is not his claim. So let me
Okay.
give the last little bit and we can sort of talk about it. So should your citizens be religious? He says, it matters very much to the community that each citizen should have a religion that will make him love his duty. But the dogmas of that religion concern the state and its members only so far as they have reference to morality and to the duties which he who professes them is bound to do to others. So the dogmas of that religion concern the state and its members only so far as they have reference to morality and basically what he does to other people.
Oh, so there's the argument for a plurality of religion in a state. It's like as long as it makes you a good person.
right.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't go against what we want you to do and doesn't make you hurt other people.
Again, we're back to Rome.
Yes.
Yeah. So he says, the dogmas of civil religion ought to be few, simple, and exactly worded, without explanation or commentary. The existence of a mighty, intelligent, and beneficent divinity, possessed of foresight and providence, the life to come, the happiness of the just, the punishment of the wicked, the sanctity of the social contract, and the laws, these are its positive dogmas. And its negative dogma is intolerance. So it's impossible to live with those we regard as damned. To love them would be to hate God who punishes them. We positively must either reclaim or torment them. So tolerance should be given to all religions that tolerate others, so long as their dogmas contain nothing contrary to the duties of citizenship. But whoever dares to say ours outside the church is no salvation ought to be driven from the state.
Gotcha. So he doesn't want like profligates, people trying to convert everybody,
Yeah.
or they're going to stir up trouble.
Or anyone that says like ours is the one true way. So this flies directly against what Christians would say, right?
Yeah.
Hate the sin, love the sinner, I guess, but they say outside of like I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Outside of Jesus, there is no way to heaven. Rousseau would have a huge problem with this.
Yeah.
He says we cannot. It is impossible to live with those we regard as damned. To love them would be to hate the God who punishes them. We must reclaim them or torment them. That's his position.
Obviously, I don't buy that, but he's saying that because the laws of the state should match the laws. Like, it sounds like he's arguing for the unity of church and state, which is not necessarily like the Christian position, right?
Yeah, I can't figure out if he's saying that there should be one central state or that we should just allow any religion that doesn't really fly in the face of the laws. And that any religion that we allow is like, okay, well, it's good to do what your law says and
Right.
it's good to do all the things and not hate other people and you're good. So as
Right.
long as it's sort of bland and accepting and likes the state, then it's something we should allow.
A religion that plays ball.
Yes.
Yeah. It seems like that's kind of the system we've set up in the States,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I have freedom of religion to a point, but if my religion says I get to kill anyone from Alabama, all of a sudden that's not okay anymore.
Sure.
Or if you set up a wacky church in Waco, Texas, then you got the feds coming.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a stance.
It makes sense. I could see it leading more than to a civil religion of some kind, as opposed, it kind of wants a type of moderation in its religion. Essentially, it just wants people to act nice and follow the laws. But I don't know if Rousseau's not concerned about that. Rousseau would prefer that, in fact, a religion that doesn't kind of stir up the waters. So, yeah, coming from him, it makes sense, right?
Yeah. I'm just wondering application. Do any of these ideas have any bearing on how we act in the state? Because right now, so this made me think of as I went through it was current Roe v. Wade politics back and forth, right? So much of the reading I've done on social media, mostly
Well, there's
Reddit,
your first problem.
mostly Reddit is
There's your second problem.
so that's my second problem for sure, is just it's hate being thrown at Christians for wanting to take away bodily autonomy of the rest of the populace. And so it seems like he was speaking directly to that, where there are two different loyalties, right? Loyalty to a church versus loyalty to the populace at large. And there is a split loyalty there, and it is creating quite a bit of division in the state. So as a state ruler, would I want to do away with this, or would I want to support it? Like, say you guys get into a situation where you are in charge of a state where this is going on. Is this something you want to discourage, to encourage? Do you want Christians in your troops? Like, you kind of were agreeing at the very beginning that Christians do split loyalty. Is this something that you would want to maintain? Should we be voting in people as sheriff, as people in charge of, cities and counties and senators? Should we be voting in Christians or not with their split loyalties?
I mean, it has to do with where you place the end authority. And it sounds like Rousseau is saying it is better to have the end authority be on the state
Right.
than it is on some sort of appeal to the outside the state, whether that's a church or an objective idea about right and wrong and justice and that kind of thing, right? So I can't, based on what Rousseau has said, I can't imagine a situation where he would be cool with saying, oh crap, this state is so corrupt that it is the right thing to overthrow it, for example. Because it sounds like he is, again, sort of like this absolutist when it comes to the state. So, but again, it's
well, he would say
it feels like he's begged the question, or it feels like he's oversimplified so much that it's kind of hard to nail him down on that question.
Well, as far as overthrowing a state, he usually just says, he doesn't say that this is when you should overthrow. He'd be like, this is what a sick state looks like.
Yeah.
And that is close to its death, right? He'll just tell you kind of what's going on, not necessarily there a should or should not about it. And here he's just giving prescriptions for a good-looking state, like one that is in health, and one that is in health doesn't necessarily have Christian troops, apparently.
Okay. Earlier you talked about Rousseau's view toward the role of religion in the state, and I think you said that part of it is raising up moral people. So he sees moral formation as a function of religion, but then kind of, I think to what you're trying to get at is that, well, that doesn't really answer the question. Maybe combining Graham and AJ's point, there will be some things that lots of religions agree on, but there are lots of things that they won't. And Rousseau's kind of papered over all of that disagreement to say religion's kind of this one category that teaches us to be truth-telling, moral people.
And yet also seems to be mocking people who are true believers in being upstanding moral citizens.
So, such as the pacifist, you mean, or someone who would reject kind of earthly success. Like he's kind of mocking them all throughout. Yeah, I agree with that. So I think he has oversimplified what religion is supposed to be doing for the populace and the complications that come from those disagreements. How then do we figure out all of our... He wants unanimity among the people. You've referenced that a few times. I don't think he's charted a direction that gets us to unanimity. It gets us to everyone in their own little camps with their shared views, if I'm understanding this correctly.
Yeah.
I don't know what the way out from that is.
A fractured republic. No.
Yeah. I don't know. It just started me thinking about how I vote and how much I want Christians in office and Christian in the populace, and how politically active Christians should be. Like,
I mean, you don't want a theocracy. Like maybe we can save some of this for the in between. But he is right in saying that there is a divided loyalty when you have true believers in things that are beyond just the functioning of your government. But it seems like he is thinks that is a troubling element to have in a state, and that is sort of troubling language because it's like, all right, well, if you put Rousseau in charge, like he's going to be doing these like what's the word, like these like pogroms, or like going through and like rooting out people that he thinks are dissenters, and like we've gone down that road in 20th century. That's not a good road to go down.
Right.
Yeah, and I think to go back, you said it's where you put the final authority.
Appeal to authority.
Like, is the state there to serve the people and their religion, or are the people and their religion there to serve the state?
Yeah.
Interesting, because it's this again. The state is the thing that's like protecting its people. I don't know. There's, I think, much to be said for Rousseau's position there. Right? We need a state to function to protect its citizens. Right?
But if it's not protecting my freedom of worship, is it doing its job? And if it's not forming me into a moral person, all it has done is sort of form me into a person that will not disobey the state, then it is not making good civilized people. It is making slaves, the very thing that he decries.
But if it's keeping law, if it's holding up a playground of laws that are enforced, then it is holding up a place where people can live and do business and grow and be in safety and have property and that kind of thing.
Sure. I'm also wondering if he is...
Unless your religion is all property is mine, right?
Right.
Man, why am I not a member of that religion?
Right.
That seems awesome.
Well, you have to give a lot of donations.
It's a big road.
Yeah.
Got to become the top guy. Right?
Yeah.
I was going to say that statement where he says anything that destroys social unity is, what does he say? Is evil or bad or, yeah. And he says the people want to be, they're looking towards heavenly things, and I know of nothing more contrary to the social spirit. I think here is where he is going wrong, is that conflict in a state is not necessarily a negative.
Yeah, I think that's
right.
Good. Like good fences make good neighbors, right?
If we are all together and we're like, yes, we have complete unanimity on this, we all agree that we should pick a fight with this giant country that is clearly better armed than we are. Like,
you want some dissent.
you want someone to say, whoa, this is not a good idea. And not only that, but like they've been kind to us. This doesn't jive with any of the higher calling of man. Like we're making a foolhardy decision to try to look honorable in the face of something that's really dangerous. This isn't a good thing, right? And so maybe the function of religion is to bring a dissent that refines the state.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if it just needs to be just the religion that does that, but I think you want the debate, you want the public, you want the forum, you want the whole point of Congress is to be able to, instead, well, if you're going to use your Roe v. Wade example, like one of the big reasons why this is such a flashpoint is because it's something that is been sent to the legislative branch. So the court has said, you guys need to legislate what you want the law of the land to be. Don't send it to us and say that we need to arbitrate it based on like a constitutional understanding. Like basically Congress is shirking its responsibility to have an informed debate about this kind of law and is kicking it up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is saying, not our job, back to Congress. You guys need to make laws about this, as opposed to having us legislate whether we think that this is a constitutional argument. So I mean, like it's getting gummed up it's getting put into the machine of the American government, but it's going to a place where there's supposed to be that dissent debate in Congress.
And that's where I think...
And Rousseau would probably say that dissension debate in Congress is is bad for the state.
The hints he always gave was that the larger the state, the more fractured and the worse.
Yeah.
So a small, simple state of like 12 guys were like, we need to build fences. Everyone was like, yeah, we got to build some fences. He's like, that's great. When it starts getting bigger, you
and
have
where
conflict.
they agree with each other.
Yes,
that's
so
the other part.
agreement is great, but my
So
point
he
is
would
that's
love
not
like
always
those little
good.
kibbutzes and those little
Right.
like communes in
He'd
Washington.
be a
and-
huge fan of a kibbutz.
Yeah.
Yeah, big fan. But that's the thing, is he's sort of discounting, I think, the role of conflict
Yeah.
in refining the state, and then religion within that conflict, right? He says that states can make a man noble, but he doesn't say how, right? Is it just hanging out with other people, or is there a role religion and conflict both play in making a man noble and calling him to higher things?
use your example from the last episode, or was the last in-between episode, I can't remember, one of the big undoers of transatlantic slavery was religious conviction.
Yes.
So now you've got the dissent against the laws of the state on a moral issue, undoing something, and then that actually ends up becoming the law of the state. So
And it has refined the state.
It is the strength of the state.
yes, and
That's
it's
what
the
I was
strength of
gonna
the
say.
state. And
Yeah.
Rousseau would probably look at that and be like, ugh, you don't want to have that element in your state. Look at them.
They're undoing all your good laws.
Undermining
and
So,
commerce
but
and-
you'd have to assume that he would look at that and be like, yeah, that is kind of that is a moral improvement on the state. I
Yeah.
don't know. So,
Yeah, so it seems like maybe he's just there are moments when he should have been more nuanced and wasn't, like sort of throwing out all conflict as negative, and saying Christian troops are silly. He says a lot of stuff.
Rousseau does say a lot of
My
With
favorite is
blind-
that Christians are born to be slaves.
Yeah.
And they know it and they like it.
I mean, it says it in the Bible. We are a slave to sin or we are in bondage to Christ. So, I mean, he's not technically wrong.
He's wrong in the way he means
Yes,
it.
he's
but-
wrong.
He is.
He's wrong in the way he means it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have we made it to the end of the social contract? Is this?
Yeah, I mean that's it. We still have a little time left in the episode if we have anything more to say, but
Have we covered all the?
everything I wanted to.
Woo!
I didn't find anything that much more compelling.
So is this where we do the? Did you like the book or not?
Sure.
What's the popularity or the legacy of Rousseau? Like, even in this conversation, and I haven't read Rousseau since college, but it's just bringing back those memories of like, it's frustrating in when's he being coy, when's he being serious, when's he being sarcastic. And feels like he's that kind of person that just loves lobbing bombs in the conversation at the dinner party because he just loves to see people getting their shorts in a wad. And
oversimplifying huge swaths of
exactly.
history.
And so that's a frustrating person to engage with. That's a frustrating person to say, I'm going to take your ideas seriously and engage you on them, because you feel like he's always being like, bah, look at this rube, like.
It also feels like one of those books, along with Thus Spake Zarathustra, that a recent college graduate
sure.
would keep in his back pocket
Yes.
and be like, oh yeah, well, Christians are born to be slaves, and sort of run off into the distance because they haven't really thought through, well, maybe it's because it's incendiary and it's kind of strongly stated and it's cool, and
So there's an immaturity to him, is what you're saying.
Is that how you would phrase it?
maybe, but he's also the seed of maybe the way we kind of view society, and that it's not necessarily just top down, God ordains the king and we all say yes. We are all in a social contract together. And that's when a couple of episodes you said, we're living in a Rousseau world. I don't think you're wrong, right? We see it as a social contract. We feel completely free to criticize the president. That was not an okay thing for most of human history. And so I think he is one of the catalysts of that, right? I think both Marx and Rousseau have had a huge influence on the way that our society functions. That doesn't mean we should take it as gospel. Like, there are a few good things in here. The whole idea of the social contract is valuable. But Christians are born to be slaves and make terrible soldiers. I don't find that to be true. Even if you're a non-Christian listener, that's simply not true, right? It's not okay to say really about anybody, probably.
And any ideas of having some kind of tolerance where you have lots of different kinds of people in a state?
Yep.
It's a good idea that Rousseau seems to be contributing as well.
And is probably how our Constitution came
To
together.
be the way that it is. And just that core of, again, the beginning of the social contract. There are certain things that we give up for the privilege of living with other people, that we get more benefit from that than being on our own. I think there's a lot to be said in that.
And even when he talks about voting, I didn't go much into this, but for things that are more important, we need more unanimity.
Sure.
Right? And we have And usually that means a smaller voting party. And I think that might be one of the reasons we have the Supreme Court, which has a limited number of justices that, have to vote a certain way.
They're not voting. All they're doing, they're trying cases.
Interpreting law.
They're not
you mean,
voting.
yeah.
They're interpreting law.
Yeah.
But
They're not legislating.
But they do like, there can be a dissenting justice when they hand down a judgment, right? And we have different, like for different votes, we need different results for different things. And I think that was probably a Rousseau thing. And some of the things he set up, I think that you would call, let's see, he sort of lauded the tribunal, whose job it is basically to not change the law, but make sure the law is followed. Sounds a lot like the Supreme Court. Well, not Supreme Court, but there are some things he set up that
The lower courts.
that sort of sound right, that he was sort of setting them up, and then I think we followed. But
I guess I was under the impression he wouldn't have liked the courts because it kind of circumvents a legislative process. You think that there's something built into the social contract that would allow for
yeah, I think he'd be okay with the courts.
court system?
I don't think you'd mind it so much.
Okay.
But should you read it is the question.
That sounds like a no. How long is it? It's not very long.
It's
right?
not very long. It's kind of hard to get through in spots, though. I'd maybe read the first bit about the social contract, about what the social contract is, and then call it a day.
Are there 4 sections?
Yeah, and the fourth one is mostly about Rome's setup and how
Oh.
Rome did it, and then also why Christians are terrible.
Okay, great.
So that's the 2 sections, and I wasn't expecting either of them, and so that's why I wanted to talk about the Christian one this time.
We're only reading book 1 in the government class.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
So
seems
read book
like
1.
the good stuff, right?
Book 1 is it's a good read, and then maybe the rest of it, just take a break. Go read something else. Go read some Plato, who's a joy.
There it is. Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, and Plato, totally not a fact.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. You ever read that Republic? Yeah.
I mean, he's a kook, but at least it's fun, right?
It's
Like,
fun. That's right.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening. This has been Classical Stuff You Should Know. You can find us on Twitter at Cliscal Stuff, CLSSCAL Stuff. You can find us on Patreon, patreon.com/classical stuff. You can find us on our website, classicalstuff.net. You can email us, the guys, at classicalstuff.net. And I think that is everything for us. So thank you all for listening. And for Graham, AJ, Thomas, we are signing off.
Ciao.
Bye.